Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight. We got a fun show for you tonight. Jeremiah Tachu is going to join us coming up in the next segment. Also, Alexis Perry from Broncos TV. But, Ben, we're going to start with the news of this week. That is Justin Simmons playing on the franchise tag. Now, this is a little bit of a different situation in the John Elway tenure. Every other time, he's been able to get a long-term extension done with each of his players that he's franchise tagged. This one's different. Why?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors. Obviously, you have the elephant in the room, the COVID situation going on, the potential for the salary cap to be diminished next year. The NFL and teams are still trying to work out mechanisms to borrow against future years with the broadcasting rights spikes, but that's not set in stone yet. And so right now what you have is a situation where we're projecting a $40 million deficit against the cap next year. And that makes teams gun shy about signing guys to big deals that could potentially keep them from being competitive in the free agent market next year. I think the Broncos and Justin Simmons fundamentally disagree on his price point. But this is not one of those situations where both sides are angry with each other. Talking to people involved, it appears both sides are amicable. They each have a number in mind. That number is different, and they're willing to play on the tag to kind of reaffirm the value this season and reassess after this year.
Yeah, we'll get to that word, amicable. It gets thrown around a lot. We'll talk about that in just a second. But, yeah, you mentioned about COVID, and Adam Schefter tweeted something out that I thought was really, really appropriate to kind of frame all of this. It's the first time since 1993 when the franchise tag was first installed that we've had this many players, 12 players playing on the franchise tag, and this out of 14. So only 2 players ended up getting the franchise tag done or getting a long-term extension done off of franchise tag. So I guess my question here is if for Broncos fans that feel like, oh, man, the Broncos really messed up. They really missed an opportunity. And maybe they're thinking that it's kind of feeling a little singled out because Justin Simmons is exactly the kind of player you want to build around. You can kind of look around the rest of the league and say, well, the Broncos are not in a unique situation. They all kind of saw the same thing.
Yeah, most of the front offices around the league seem to have seen the same thing. I think everybody, the reason that this hits close to home is because everybody's looking at Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, and it looks like their ability to print money right now in signing he and Chris Jones to long-term deals. But don't be fooled by that. The Chiefs are taking a fundamentally different approach. They realize that they're in their Super Bowl window, and they're asking for forgiveness, not permission. They're going out there and trying to see if they can get this all done, and then they'll figure it out later. That rarely works out. You go back to the uncapped year, look at Dallas, look at Washington. They wound up paying heavy fines and I believe lost some draft picks on top of it for trying to circumvent the rules ahead of time and take advantage of that stuff. So I think that the thing to look at here is that the Denver Broncos and Justin Simmons have different ideas of the number that Justin Simmons should be playing on. And they agreed to disagree on that and play on the number mandated by the franchise tag. He's not threatening a holdout. He's not sitting here bad-mouthing the organization. If you know Justin Simmons, those things aren't going to happen anyway. And so I think at the end of this season, you reassess, you come back to the table, you say, okay, we know the financial situation around the league now with the virus stuff. We've had 2 years of Justin at elite play, all-pro level play in Vic Fangio's defense. Now we're ready to commit long-term.
Okay, so there we go. Now we're getting to the amicable part. That's what we saw all over Twitter. You threw that out there. So amicable, well, how does that frame next year's negotiations? Because oftentimes in these situations, when two sides disagree, there can be a little bit of tension as it relates to the next negotiation. But it sounds like from what you're hearing, that's not the case.
Right. And I think that Justin's going to be more motivated. I can tell you from talking to different people that he's probably going to be a bit more motivated this season, and motivated Justin Simmons. Well, that's going to be a good thing for Broncos fans, as far as that kind of stuff goes. But, I don't think that there's animosity. I think people understand that there's a business and there's business components to this involved. And, $11.4 million isn't anything to sneeze at. It's certainly better than what Justin was making before. So, I think in this situation, the way to view this is the team got him a promise ring. It's not an engagement ring. They're not getting married yet. They got him a promise ring, and they want to wait to see how this works out before they make it formal and make it official.
I want to add one more wrinkle in this, something we discussed on the radio show. Is it possible that he gets franchise tagged for a second year, knowing that that's probably going to be around $14 million? I think on the outset, people would be like, why would you want to do that? Well, if the Broncos were coming into this thinking, okay, well, it's going to be probably around 25 to 30 million guaranteed. Well, at 14 million, a second franchise tag, you're basically breaking even. And in this case, maybe Justin Simmons wants to see if he can just get that guaranteed money. It might end up working for both sides. But again, you're utilizing the franchise tag in a way that it's not really intended for.
Right. I think if you're the Denver Broncos, you'd have to make sure that Justin Simmons is okay with that. He made it known back in December, to us and we put it out there that he would be okay playing on the franchise tag if they were unable to come to a deal. That he was okay with that. He was not going to hold out. He wanted to be a Denver Bronco. I think once that's a thing. Twice on the franchise tag could be a little insulting to a player. So you'd have to make sure that player is okay with that. If he is, Justin Simmons could stand to make more money doing that. $25 million guaranteed over 2 franchise tags because of the 20% bump on the second tag, and then turning around and signing another probable 4-year deal at 28 years old. He stands to make more money doing that, while the Broncos save money on the front end. So, I think it could be beneficial to both parties.
I think it could be too. All right, last thing here for you. So the Broncos have kind of set themselves up in an interesting situation, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They have a lot of flexibility coming up next year. They might even be in position where they might move on from several of these guys. It was kind of put out there by our friend Joe Rolls from My High Report that the Broncos, up to 7 guys, could potentially be moving on if the Broncos decide to get some cap savings, renegotiate some contracts, but then move on. What do you think about the way the Broncos might basically take a look at their defense coming up this next year? Would they really move on from 7 to 8 starters? That seems ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that number's a little bit high. The possibility, because that many people are potentially not going to be under contract, I guess, frames the way that statement can be made, but I don't think it's likely. There are some fundamental bedrock players in there that you're going to want to keep. And I think that they will. There are some players that they'll move on from. Some of that will be contracts, some of that will be due to age. And some of that will be due to the fact that you've got younger and cheaper, coming up. I don't think that they're going to move on from 7 starters. That seems a bit ridiculous. But the idea that the defense could look drastically different next season is not out of the realm of possibility.